Today we're getting into the physical setup for watering goats. What you put water in, how deep, how many, and the specific problems that can kill kids and trap horned goats. I covered the big picture in episode 9, water as the most important nutrient, monitoring intake, why goats are picky about water quality, and how we haul water for rotational grazing. This episode goes deeper into the actual hardware, the configurations we use, and some mistakes that were expensive enough to remember. Let's get to it. Hey there, welcome to GoatWise. I'm Millie Bradshaw, animal scientist and rancher. Here we talk meat goats, feeding strategies, goat fencing, and livestock management that holds up in real life. If you care about raising goats well and building systems that actually work, you're in the right place. Let's talk livestock. All right, before we get into what's happening on the ranch, I have a quick ask. If this podcast has been useful to you, I'd really appreciate a review on Apple Podcasts. Just scroll down to ratings and reviews, tap the stars, and leave a few words. It's the best way to help other serious producers find the show, and it takes about 2 minutes. While you're doing that, go grab the free kidding due date chart at goatwise.com/kidding-chart. That's goatwise.com/kidding-chart. It's free, it's useful during breeding and kidding season, and it also gets you on the insider email list where I share the things that don't make it into the podcast. The link is in the show notes. Here's what's happening on the ranch. Spring showed back up the way it usually does here. Snow, wind, and cold. We dropped to 11 degrees the last few nights, which is going to slow the grass down a bit. Not ideal, but it's part of ranching in this country. We're planning to head out on grass with the goats in the next day or two. The freezing temperatures are going to make it interesting, but we'll work through it. We had a great group of visitors last week. A class of animal science and range science students came out to tour the ranch and see what meat goat production looks like in an extensive system. They asked good questions and they came in with some real perspective, which I appreciated. I always enjoy getting a chance to visit with the next group of people stepping into agriculture. Dairy kidding is wrapped up and we're shifting into stand training with the young does. They've settled down quite a bit from the kidding chaos, so I think we can get them into a routine without too much trouble. That's the plan anyway. We'll see what they think about it. Water is the single most important nutrient for all livestock. And I know I said that in episode 9, but I'm going to keep saying it because repetition is how things actually stick. If you ever have an animal go off feed or start acting sick, the very first thing to check is their water. Is it clean? Are they drinking enough? Can they actually get to it? Those 3 questions, in that order, will catch a surprising number of problems before they get expensive. Before I get into the hardware, I want to walk through the actual water requirements because those numbers inform everything about how many containers you need and how much water your goats are consuming. A dry, non-lactating doe needs about 1 to 2 gallons per day. Late gestation, you're looking at 1.5 to 2.5. A lactating doe, 2 to 4 gallons. And if she's a heavy milker, push that higher. Milk is mostly water, and high-producing dairy does can really drink some water. Now, what drives those numbers matters more than the averages. Temperature is a big one. Intake drops in cold weather, sometimes dangerously low, and in hot summer, it can easily double. Feed type matters too. Dry hay means higher water needs. Fresh pasture means lower because there's moisture in the forage. Salt and mineral intake actually drive drinking up, which is a good thing. And water quality matters more than people give it credit for. If the water is slightly off, dirty, icy, stale, intake drops fast. Goats are not going to push through questionable water to hit their daily requirement until they are desperate. They'll just go short. A practical rule of thumb. Plan for about 2 gallons per doe per day and double it for lactating does in hot weather. Our goats are smaller than what a lot of those averages are based on. Spanish, Boer, and some crossbreds. They're forage based and they're selected for low input. So our actual numbers on fresh pasture in hot summer run closer to about 2.5 gallons per lactating doe, about 1.25 gallons per dry yearling, and about 1/3 of a gallon for a nursing or young kid. Your numbers are going to reflect your breed and your production system. If you're running dairy goats, plan for considerably more. The biggest and most important watering we do is out in the field, in the pastures. And for that, we use lick tubs, specifically the 125-pound size, not the 250-pound tubs. The 250s are way too tall. Those are mostly used by cattle producers, and they're handy for a lot of things on the ranch, just not for this. The inside measurements of the 125-pound tubs are 21 inches in diameter and 11.5 inches tall. That works out to about 17 gallons per tub. Those measurements are from a blue Vitalix lick tub that we use regularly with the show goats and we still use with the dairy does, though we don't buy very many of them anymore. I think that the container size is pretty consistent regardless of what lick tub brand you're buying. The outside measurements are 21.75 inches diameter and 11.75 inches tall. Use those if you're shopping for something comparable at the farm store. The height on those tubs is ideal for does and bucks, and by the time the kids are old enough to be drinking on their own, they can reach in without falling in. And they're just tall enough that newborns can't get into them easily. Outside of our cattle trough situation, which I'll get to in a minute, we have not had kids drown in our tubs. We've been using this setup for a long time, and that has held. As kids grow, they actually can get in the tubs. They don't very often because goats don't like being wet. But if they do, once they're big enough to climb in, they're big enough to climb back out. So the drowning risk kind of self-manages as they get bigger. Goats are prey animals. If they don't feel safe, they are not going to stick their head into a container where it blocks their line of vision. When the water level gets low, they need either a group situation where they can take turns drinking while others watch, or they need to feel secure enough that it doesn't bother them. That is a real reason why goats sometimes look like they're refusing water when actually the water level just dropped below the level where they feel comfortable sticking their head in. It doesn't matter how clean it is. If they can't see and they're worried about predators, they're not going to drink. We don't use one big trough. We use multiple tubs. If a goat poops in one tub, the rest of the water isn't contaminated. With a bigger trough, one goat contaminates the whole thing and you're dumping and refilling all of it. With the small tubs, you dump that one. They stack really well for moving. We can adjust the number of tubs we have out based on herd size and time of year, and we give them enough water to get through the day, which means at the end of the day, there's maybe 1 or 2 inches in the bottom of the tubs, and some will be dry. That way, we're not wasting water, and every single day they get fresh water. In the hot summer, when all of the goats are on summer pasture, we'll have 14, 16, maybe even 18 tubs out there. That's somewhere between 240 and 300 gallons per day for a herd of roughly 80 lactating does, 25 dry yearlings, and about 150 kids. The math works because our animals are on fresh pasture, and fresh pasture supplies significant moisture. When we move goats every day in electric netting, we dump what's left in the tubs, stack them, and move them to the next paddock. If we're going to the far side of the property, they go on the water wagon. We have a wagon that is a hay wagon in the winter, it's a water wagon in the summer, and we put an IBC tote and a 2 to 3 inch diameter hose so we can let a lot of water come through fast and fill those tubs quickly. The tubs get dumped and moved to a new location every day, which basically eliminates algae issues, stagnant water issues, dirt building up in the bottom. Over the course of the summer, we can get a little film on the inside of the containers. You let it dry and it just flakes out. Not a big deal. One thing that happens once the tubs are empty, the goats push on them. Empty tubs get pushed up against the electric netting and they can actually start to fold the fence over. It's more of an annoyance than a real problem. It puts some curve in the vertical plastic struts, makes the fence a little harder to keep standing straight. In summer, when they're going through extra water, we'll go back out in the afternoon and partially refill the tubs. That keeps them from pushing them around and makes sure they've got water through the heat of the day. If a goat were drinking out of a tub that had been shoved up against the fence, they could theoretically lift their head and catch a horn in the netting. It's probably happened. We haven't lost any fence or any goats over it that we're aware of. Now, the cattle trough situation. We have some built-in tire troughs on the property that were originally set up for cattle. They have a critter ramp. If something falls in, it can climb back out. The setup has a platform in the middle where the plumbing comes up with water running all the way around the outside, like a moat. Goats love a platform, so they jump from the outside onto that platform. Ultimately, it gets wet, it gets slick, they slide off into the water, and they can't get back out. We lost kids in those troughs. They weren't newborn. I'd say 30 to 40 pound kids. So to use them safely for goats, we'd need to put washed rock in the bottom to raise the ground level so their feet hit ground when they go in and they can figure out how to get themselves out. We haven't done that yet, so we just don't use those troughs for the goats right now. Barn watering. For smaller scale producers or people with goats in the barn, or if you kid in the barn, there are some pretty clever automated systems like PVC pipe running across the back of the pens with holes cut in it so the goats drink directly from the pipe as water runs through. It's constantly fresh. We've never set one of those up because we don't barn kid anymore, and you need somewhere for the overflow to go. In our setup, we'd end up just making a muddy mess. Not to mention that overflow feels a little bit wasteful in our environment. But if you're in a situation where that works, it's a nice solution. For barn watering, you could use the same lick tubs we use in the field, but they take up a lot of space in a pen, and it's genuinely too much water for 1 or 2 goats. So we end up using buckets. And the biggest risk with buckets is the bail. That's B-A-I-L. Though handle works too. It's the curved metal piece that flips up and over the top. If the bail is up and a goat gets their horns underneath it, they can end up with a bucket hanging on their head. If the bucket is secured and the bail is in the up position, they can actually get their heads stuck down in there and drown. We have not had that happen, but I've heard of it happening and it is possible. Your highest risk time for horn-related bucket problems, in our experience with boar and Spanish goats, is that yearling year. When does are about a year old, their horns are the perfect length and aimed in the perfect direction to get caught on a bucket bail, on a fence, anywhere. That is your actual danger window. Different breeds develop horns differently, so this may not hold across everything you're raising. But for boar and Spanish goats, that yearling year is when the bucket setup really can cause problems. So you have 3 options for barn buckets. Option 1, parachute cord and a carabiner. Loop the parachute cord around the top of the panel, clip the carabiner to the bucket. You can adjust the height. When the bucket is hanging by the handle, the bail is up but angled toward the panel. If a goat gets their horns underneath it, the bucket can swing and move and swivel, and they can tip their head down and get their horns back out without the bucket actually getting stuck on their head. That works really quite well. Option 2, a hanging frame bucket holder. It loops over the top of the panel, hangs down flat against the panel, and has a ring that the bucket itself sits inside of. The bail is laid down flat. You reach in, grab the bucket, go fill it, bring it back, set it back in the ring. It keeps the bucket at a good height for adult goats. Not so ideal for young goats. It's too tall for them. They do make these in different lengths. Search for hanging bucket holders or panel bucket holders at your farm supply store or online. Option 3. Take the bale off the bucket and set the bucket on the ground. They'll still spill, there will still be a wet mess, but there is zero chance of a bale getting involved. The bucket on the ground is the most likely to get pooped in, and when they poop in the bucket, they will not drink the water, so you have to pay attention to that. The hung buckets can get contaminated too, but it's less likely. I've used bungees to try to limit the buckets tipping over in this situation with some success, and that's something you could try if this is the route you choose. So hang it and secure the bale, put it in a frame holder, or pull the bale off and set it on the ground. Those are your options. They all work depending on your setup. Fresh water every day, the right container for the situation, and a setup that doesn't give horns anything to catch. That covers most of the problems people are dealing with at the water trough without ever knowing that's what was causing them. If you have any questions, shoot me an email, millie@drycreekpastures.com, or come over and drop a question in the community. That is at goatwise.com/community. See you next week. Hey there, thanks for listening today. If this episode was helpful, share it with another producer who's raising goats. And if you haven't already, leave a quick review on Apple Podcasts. It helps more serious livestock owners find the show. As always, this podcast is for educational purposes only and is not a substitute for veterinary advice. I'll see you next week here on GoatWise.